Hello and welcome to ChinnyVision. Most sequels tend to be a bit rubbish, so let's see how the MSX2 goes. Here on ChinnyVision we do have a bit of love for the MSX. Already own two machines, the Sanyo I reviewed a few weeks back, and the original Sony Hit Bit from I think about 18 months ago. A really nice machine, bedeviled in the UK and Europe by rather poor specky ports, but you get those Japanese games on cartridge and they tend to be rather good. So I've been tempted by an MSX2 for quite a while, and then I went mad and bought this from Dutch eBay. It's a Sony MSX2 HB-F9P. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is the follow-up to the MSX. Same processor, Z80 processor. This machine has 128k RAM. They all have 128k video RAM. Now, for Spectrum, Amstrad and Commodore users, that's not shared memory with the computer, as with those machines. It's a separate memory bank just for video RAM. So it's not 128k RAM in total. It's actually 256k RAM, 128k of actual RAM, then 128k of video RAM. Very much like you get in PCs, I suppose, because all the other computers I can think of, even the Amiga and ST, take their video RAM from the main memory. The MSX2 spec requires at least 64k, but you need 128k really. I've seen some 64k machines floating around, but you need 128k. There's 32k of ROM in there and 16k of sub-ROM, and this has MSX Basic version 2 or 2.1. It has the Yamaha V9938 video display processor, which is backwards compatible with the original MSX1. And look at the specs here. You can have an MSX2 with 64k of video RAM as well, but I don't think that will be desirable because most machines have 128k. That's expandable to 192k. You have 512 colours, which is up from the original MSX, which I think is 15, very similar to the original Spectrum. And screen modes are very interesting. Graphically similar to the ST, I suppose, because most of the graphics modes offer 16 colours from 512 colours. The other thing to note, and I'm going to be interested when we look inside this thing, is the MSX2 standard requires a real-time clock with battery backup. So goodness knows what that is going to look like in here. Hopefully it hasn't leaked. The reason I chose a Hit Bit was because I was very impressed with my MSX1 Hit Bit, the build quality of it. So I looked for a MSX2 Hit Bit, and this one came up on Dutch eBay. You won't find many of these in the UK. There's very, very few MSX2s in the UK because the original MSX basically flopped in the UK. So many of the manufacturers didn't bother to directly market into the UK. So your best bet to get hold of an MSX is Dutch eBay. You can go to Japan and get one there, but bear in mind, if you go to Japan, the problem is the machines are going to be 110 volts, 60 hertz, and you're going to have to convert that to whatever, if you're in the UK, 240 volts, 50 hertz, or anywhere else in Europe, come to think of it, which could be problematic. So you're better off with Dutch eBay, even if the Japanese games are going to run just a fraction slower. Unless you're handy with electronics, of course, in which case go ahead. But the problem with Japanese eBay as well is to get a machine over here can cost, I was looking at them, about £70 just in postage. So the machines are cheap on Japanese eBay, but the postage to get it to Europe is not. Whereas Dutch eBay, the machines are more expensive and potentially, as I say, a little bit slower, but this cost me about £20 to get to the UK. The machine was just over £100, I think, from memory, and another £20 to get it to the UK. So much better deal, but these things are not cheap. Don't expect to be getting bargains unless you get extremely lucky. We'll have a look at this machine here. It is extremely nice. Anyone who remembers my original Hit Bit will remember how I liked the build quality of the machine. The keyboard, the keyboard is lovely. Again, we were saying about the Tandy the other week, having a nice keyboard, in the original MSX Hit Bit I reviewed having a nice keyboard. Again, Sony have gone to town. Lovely, just a league above everything else, really. Perhaps not quite as nice as that Tandy keyboard, and perhaps not quite as nice as the MSX1. But then again, perhaps this machine hasn't had that much use because these keys feel quite springy. So perhaps there is a little bit of use needed. You have your standard MSX cursor keys up there and these keys across the top that do various things, F1 to F10, and a reset button on the top there. You've got your 2 cartridge ports, this time on the top there. Cartridges are backwards compatible with the MSX1, so you can choose either cartridge slot and just pop your cartridge in like that. You can even have 2 cartridges in there if you want. So again, just pop that in there and away you go. One of those, of course, could be an expansion cartridge or floppy controller or whatever you need, really. As I say, fully compatible or backwards compatible with the MSX1. These are MSX1 games here. One thing important to note about this machine, there's no built-in floppy drive. MSX2s generally come with a 360K or 720K 3.5-inch drive. This one does not, but we'll explain why that's not necessarily a problem a little bit later on. This machine is in white. We don't have too much discolorization here. Hasn't gone too, it's a little bit yellowy, but nothing too major for the age. Any colour you've got coming across there is just my lighting gel. If you look at the left-hand side, that's probably the true colour there, but I always put a little bit of coloured light in just to liven these things up, as you can see down there. But no, it looked in fairly good nick, and it was proven working when I ordered it as well, so that was good. But of course, if you're ordering off of Dutch eBay or any foreign site, and I apologise because 50% of viewers from ChinnyVision are in the UK, and then it's Australia, Germany, and America. So when I talk about British plugs and things, then you guys are probably going to switch off. But this has a Euro style plug. I think this is on here, not fused. So if you're in the UK or another country, get yourself a high quality adapter like this one. Now, again, UK viewers, when you buy your adapter, it's going to have a 13 amp fuse in there. So put that down there. 13 amp fuse, I've changed that for a 3 amp fuse because frankly, having a 13 amp fuse in that thing is just might as well just have a rusty nail across the terminals, because if it does blow, then 13 amps is quite a lot. So this machine only needs 3 amps. I put 3 amps in there, and I bought a proper master plug. Is the master plug branded? I think it is. One from Sainsbury's as opposed to eBay, because there's all sorts of safety features built into the proper ones of these as opposed to the cheap ones. Yeah, master plug. So you plug your connector in there, and there you go. You could, of course, replace the plug totally on the end there, but I like to try and keep the machines authentic. It is a Dutch machine, so it's going to have a Dutch plug on it, and this thing costs about £1, £1.50, something like that. That's perfectly safe, and that's not going anywhere. So I'm quite happy with that. This particular machine was released for the European market in 1986. There's a Spanish version which ends in S on the model number. I think it was a Russian version as well, with some strange keyboard arrangement. Sorry if you're Russian, it's not strange to you, but I think it's JCUKEN as opposed to QWERTY. And apparently there were prototypes made for the USSR Ministry of Education, but Yamaha won the deal, so Sony didn't win there. And I apologise if the light levels are changing a little bit today, because 1 minute it's sunny outside, 1 minute it's absolutely throwing it down with rain and dark. So I've got windows in the room, so I'm just trying to compensate for that. But let's have a look at the machine and see what we've got on it. So we go on the side there, and we have a on-off switch. None of this nice stuff from the Hit Bit 1 with that hi-fi style switch we saw. This is just a simple on-off switch. The power supply is integrated. It's in the side there. That's as close as you can get to it there. Flip it around. Now, you might be expecting to see a disk drive on the side there, but no, as I said, this machine has no disk drive at all, and you just got controller A and controller B, standard Atari style joysticks there. Around the back, you've got a standard MSX tape port, standard MSX printer port, all this stuff is standard. Standard MSX RGB out, no SCART. No SCART on this one, unlike the Hit Bit 75B. Huge shame, don't know why Sony did that, but there you go. RF out, and those aren't switches, by the way, they're just case catches. And an audio video out, which you can switch between colour and black and white. Presumably, if you want to use this as a very serious machine, you can turn the chroma off on a black and white monitor and get a better picture. So you can switch. That's a nice touch. Nice bit of engineering there. You can turn the colour signal off, and you lose all that PAL artifacting, and you get a clean black and white signal. Power supply is integrated, has this usual Sony thing of having that earthing thing there to earth the chassis if you want to. And not much else really. It's pretty frugal on the back compared to the other MSX machines, although at least you do get the RGB there. And of course, as I say, there's 2 cartridge ports on the top. So unlike the 75B, which is more packed in at the back, which that has an expansion / cartridge port there, whereas this is all much more spread out with no SCART, which is why I guess it looks more Spartan on the back. So I'm going to flip this around and have a look underneath. This thing is heavy. My hand's hurting from holding it up for so long. Right, it's going to go around that way there, I think. And have a look at the bottom. Serial number 401452. Potentially again low down, don't know. Model HB-F9P. Not much else to look at the bottom here. I can't even see where the screw holes are if we're going to take this thing apart. Oh, the screw, oh, they're there. Okay. Let's see if we can get this thing apart and have a look at what's inside. Right, I've done it. So I've not looked inside yet. So let's just open her up. Have the first look inside this machine for years. It is clipped at the back. Oh, something's holding it on there. How do we do this? Right, looking underneath here, this is complicated. I definitely am going to have to stop the video for a second and get some of these interconnecting cables undone. So I've got this all opened up, and a little bit difficult because there was an LED power cable there which goes onto the board there, and I had to get that switch outside. But once you're opened, nothing much else to worry about apart from this ribbon connector, which I didn't want to disconnect for the usual reasons. It's 30 years old and it probably won't connect back up again, and these things are always very fragile and not very replaceable. That's the back of the keyboard there. Nothing particularly exciting, standard keyboard. See all these individually switched. You've got 4 connections on each one. That might indicate to me that's a properly switched keyboard, not a membrane type. Not sure. Let's go in closer on the main board. So here on the main board, and a little bit awkward angle for me because I can't attach this keyboard. So I'm going to try and have a look around what we've got on here. Power supply top left-hand corner. That is corded as we saw earlier. And you've got this little breakout board there with a separate little fuse on it there. And the power comes in through there. There's a ground connection on that actually, but it's no connection to the power supply. And then that goes out to the main switch there. You've got this big heatsink here, and that is a heatsink because perhaps it's got some shielding properties as well, but there is a voltage regulator attached there. And you've got the power caps, big power caps there, and there's some more caps underneath there as well. Have given this a quick wipe over, but it's pretty clean. And the one thing I noticed on this board is there's a lot of links on here. This is a slightly strange board. I didn't say anything till now because I thought it might catch people's attention. Look, it's a brown board here, and all these links as opposed to traces on a board. So I don't know what's going on underneath there, but it's all very interesting. Up here by the cartridge connectors, we've got the Z80 processor manufactured by Sharp, Z80A, and we've got a date code week 47, 1986. Never see Zilog chips, do you? The proper Zilog ones. It's always manufactured by someone else, and Sony, in the other Hit Bit I looked at, had another Sharp chip in there. Of course, it was freely licensable from Zilog anyway, so you didn't have to pay a license fee. I think anybody could go and manufacture them. And up by the joystick ports here, we've got the internal battery. Thankfully, hasn't leaked. It's soldered onto the board via 2 pins either side. I can't really move that. Can I move that around a little bit? I don't know. I don't really want to because that ribbon connector. But there's a solder point there and a solder point on the other side as well. So I guess that'd probably come out fairly easily if you want to replace it. It looks like a fairly standard battery. Don't know if that's original or not. It does say it's sealed, and it does seem to be working because the machine remembers the date and time when you turn it off and seems to retain it. So I'm guessing that's probably a replacement battery at some stage from a previous owner. Either way, I think I'm going to replace that, although some MSX owners just cut the thing off the board, because it doesn't actually need it, and that would prevent any damage. Although having a real-time clock's pretty neat in an 8-bit computer, so I think I might at some stage just obtain a replacement battery and solder in a new one. That chip there, obscured by wires that hopefully you can see. I'm just going to pull that wire out the way there. Has Microsoft written on it, which means it is probably the MSX custom chip. It's a big old beast of a chip there. So, and I think, yeah, that's going to be the MSX custom chip there. A lot of the things on here are actually labelled as well. And over here we got 1, 2, 3, 4 chips for the video RAM and another 4 chips for the main RAM. So they're going to be 32K chips each, and they're all identical. Very helpfully, well, it's an EEPROM there. You can see it's got a label over the top, but they've very helpfully labelled that the basic chips. That's the main system ROM there with the MSX Basic in it. I suspect there's all sorts of interesting things underneath this board because it does sit off the main board. There's a gap, so I don't want to start undoing all of this or taking that tin can off the top there. But this is just a basic quick look round, and we have a tape relay, as you'd expect, up by the tape port there. Not a nice clear one where you can see inside, just a white, a solid plastic one. But you can see how they've really cost reduced this machine. There's not a lot of chips in there. This MSX chip there is going to be doing a hell of a lot of the work, as is that Yamaha, and I think that is an ASIC there, doing that work there. So a lot of it's been integrated down. Very unusual construction, see all these links everywhere, and I just wonder what's going on underneath. And we do have these 2 wires running across here, which I'd usually say were bodge wires, except that one there is labelled J3 that end and J3 that end, which indicates to me they knew perfectly well what they were doing, and this isn't some kind of afterthought. It's been thought about at the board design stage, and perhaps because of the way they got these links running across the board, they couldn't run a track from there up to there. So they decided, well, we'll just put a couple of wires on and just get around it that way. Bit inelegant, but probably no other way to do it, I guess. So inside, it's a bit unusual in terms of 8-bit micros, as you saw, but very nicely laid out. Externally, the industrial design is very nice. It's a typical Sony. It's a shame it's in white as opposed to black, but I think Sony wanted these to go into the home as opposed to go to general computer market, because I think most Hit Bits are black. In terms of running software, no floppy drives. As you can see, no room inside to put one. So you're going to have to buy a cartridge that plugs into an external floppy drive if you get this model. But other MSX2s have built-in floppy drives. I strongly recommend you find one if you want a floppy drive that has 720K, not 360K. Because if you get 720K drive, then you can just plug it into a Windows XP box or whatever that has a 720K drive in it, and you can copy software all day long. Whereas if you've got a 360K system, a little bit more difficult. So not impossible, but just a little bit more difficult. But it's not the end of the world, because actually these days you're probably going to want an SD card adapter for your MSX, and I'm going to be looking at in a future video of how you're going to run software on this particular machine, because I don't have a floppy drive for it, but I do have an SD card adapter. There'll be a future follow-up video with it. In terms of software, there's not a huge amount of MSX2 software, because most of it was on cartridges, and these are MSX1 cartridges that came with this. I've got Salamander, Brilliant Rock Hard Shoot 'em Up, and F1 Spirit, also an MSX1 game. But a brilliant driving game. These also have integrated sound chips in them, so you get improved sound, because the basic sound in these machines is no different from the AY chip in the MSX1. Improved graphics, but the sound is exactly the same, which is why these cartridges are really good. And even these cartridges, which are MSX1 games, will have a significant jump up from most MSX software compared to what we're used to in the UK. And I'll be reviewing these games separately at some stage, but you can see F1 Spirit's a very nice driving game. And Salamander, yeah, very nice shoot 'em up Japanese. Both of them by Konami as well. Great graphics and audio on the games. but you can also play all the MSX1 library, which includes all those terrible European Spectrum ports that run at slower speeds than the original games. But you do have those MSX1 cartridges and MSX1 tape titles from the Far East and other places, and when the ports will be done properly. So you do get a fair variety of software. You just have to avoid those bad Spectrum ports. If you do have a floppy drive, then there's plenty of software available, and as I say, it's easily copied if you've got a 720k machine. Plenty of cartridge games as well. I think there's about 150, 140, something like that, exclusive MSX2 titles, and some MSX1 titles also have slight enhancements if you plug them into an MSX2. Make sure you're not looking at MSX2 Plus games, because that's, again, another enhanced system that this machine can't run. This can play all MSX2 games and all MSX1 games. When you turn this machine on, you get greeted with the familiar MSX logo. You get told how much video RAM you've got, in this case 128k. It doesn't tell you how much system RAM you've got, just the video RAM. And you can actually add a boot up message of up to, I think, 8 characters if you want to. If you've got a cartridge plugged in, the machine will then boot straight to the game or whatever software you've got in the cartridge. Otherwise, it will boot to something called MemoVision, which is a Sony piece of software, and that will let you, it's like a diary system that lets you record things, has a calculator, a calendar, and timers and things. It's pretty useless. I suppose it's supposed to be useful around the home. I don't know. Fascinatingly, even though it comes from 1986, it's Y2K compliant. It is quite happy with the fact it's 2017, quite happy with the date and time in 2017, it's fine. And the onboard battery will store the date and times you set it. Of course, if it's come from Holland, it will boot into Dutch. But if you can navigate your way around the menus with Google Translate, a very handy app, you can find the bit where you can actually turn it into English. So if you're an English speaker, or I think some other languages in there as well, actually, you can just turn it into something that you can make sense of. If you want to go basic, when the MSX logo comes up on boot and the machine beeps, hold down the graph key and you'll get kicked straight into MSX Basic 2. The MSX.org website also has a full service manual for this machine, in this case the Spanish model, but it applies to all of them. Gives you the full spec, full list of components. Very, very nice. Not all machines get this. Imagine Sinclair putting out something in this detail. Perhaps they did. I'm not convinced they did, but breaks down the machine, gives you all the components. Very nice block diagrams as well. Useful if you're trying to repair the machine. So is the MSX2 a machine that's worth getting? I'd say yes. If you're in the UK, you're going to have to import one from Holland. You can go expensive and import one from Japan, but you're going to have to know how to run it, because it's going to be 60 Hertz, 110 volts, and obviously if you plug that into the UK power supply or European power supply, you've got all sorts of problems. If you're in America, you're in luck because you've got the same system, so you don't have those problems. But in the UK, yeah, best off looking at the Dutch systems. There's a whole plethora of MSX2 systems out there, all different price ranges. A lot of the Dutch ones are Philips, because Philips are a Dutch manufacturer and therefore kind of dominated the market in Holland. I was after a Hit Bit because I was so impressed with my 75B, and yeah, this thing is built unbelievably well compared to most other computers. It's just so nice, even if it is white. I prefer it in black, but hey ho, you can only take what you can actually find on eBay. And yes, it's going to be expensive to ship it over, and you're going to have to find, if you've got one of these machines, some kind of SD card solution to plug into your cartridge socket. But then again, you're going to have instant loading, and most of them come with RAM upgrades and extra things as well, and we'll be covering that another day. You've also got the advantage you can run all MSX1 software. This particular machine has RGB out, which is obviously gives you a better picture quality. No SCART socket, but that's easily got around. Overall, I'd say the MSX2 is a highly desirable 8-bit system to have. No, you're not going to have as many games for it as you'd have on a Commodore 64, but you're looking at a different league of computer. You're looking at something a little bit more obscure and interesting than the Spectrum, Commodore and Amstrad, which are, there's lots of those machines out there, lots of games. They're easy to run. For the general collector, they're brilliant. But if you want to be a little bit more specialist, find something that you can really appreciate as an item to look at and hold and run software on, I don't think you can go far wrong with something like a MSX2 Hit Bit. It's a wonderful machine. You're going to be able to play all those great Japanese shoot 'em ups, even if they are a little bit slower than a Japanese machine. But, you know, if you're looking for something a little bit of a step up from your average 8-bit micro, and even an MSX1, which are common in most countries, then look at importing an MSX2, because I don't think you'll be disappointed.